Hey guys, here we are in week 6. This week we are giving an informative speech. I thought long and hard on the topic to give on this speech, and I have resolved to bring out a little bit of the nerd in me. Not that I haven't already, but to also give you guys a little information and the history of a favorite pastime of mine, Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a game that's been around a little over 40 years, just like me. Hopefully by the end of this speech you have a better understanding, maybe just that you won't be as confused. Its creators were Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Its true beginnings came from a game that Gary Gygax created called Chainmail. Chainmail was a fantastic medieval adventure of warfare where you had wizards and heroes and dragons and whatnot. Through multiple collaborations between Gygax and Arneson, they drafted and published the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons in 1974. It consisted of 3 books. In these, they were in a little box that was kind of a wood grain colored cardboard box with titles like Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasures, The Underworld, and Wilderness Adventures. And through many years of collaboration, it's gone through several editions. The edition started at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, went to 2nd edition, the introduction of the THAC0 system. That particular system was overly complicated, and it kind of stressed some people out, because there was a lot of math with that. Later editions, the 3rd edition came out, and that's really when I adopted the game, and that's where I've got most of my actual information is from 3rd edition. I currently play 5th edition, and 5th edition is kind of a remake of everything that was good about all the previous editions, minus THAC0. The wonderful thing about Dungeons and Dragons is it's a game that's played in the mind pretty much. It's not necessarily, it's a board game, but it doesn't really have a board. To play the game, you need a copy of the player's handbook, which is this particular book right here. This is from third edition, or 3.5. It's on the book right there. You'll also need an assortment of dice. The dice are my little favorite baggie of dice is right here. But as you can see, there's a 100-sided die that looks a little bit like a golf ball. You don't play that very often. And you'll have a 20-sided die that's kind of a little round. It has 20 sides, of course. You'll have a 12-sided die, a hexagonal shape all the way around. You'll have a 10-sided die, which is like this, which you could also use 2 of these to do a percentage instead of this big round monster here. You have an 8-sided die, which is that little dude right there. 8 sides. You have your standard in every board game style 6-sided die, which everybody's familiar with, a little cube, a little 6-sided die. And the 4-sided die has a little triangle. Dropped it. And for people who really go all out, look at there, we got a 2-sided die, which is, yes, a coin that I can't hold. 2-sided die. At any rate, the whole object of the game is to have fun and to get together with friends and create a little adventure. You'll have one person who is in the group that is called the Dungeon Master. He will need a copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This particular book is very useful for the Dungeon Master to go in and kind of create his own little world, if you will. It's full of lore and just anything that you can think of. There's building a different world in this particular area. There's NPCs that he can pull off the cuff right there. There's caves. There's magic items in here. Go towards the back of this book. Here is a whole list of artifacts. Look, there's stuff that I got just shoved in the book randomly. And the Dungeon Master would need this. Now, he does not have to actually create his own world just exclusively from this book. There's also things that he could purchase. There's things that he could purchase, much like this Freeport book. This is not even TSR or whatever. It works off of the D20 system, which is the system that Dungeons and Dragons uses, and it makes it very easy for you to use supplemental material from other places. There are many campaigns that you can purchase that are directly related to Dungeons and Dragons, much like this big beast, the Temple of Elemental Evil. This particular campaign is designed for characters up to from 4th level to 14th level. So that brings up a valid point. How do you play the game? Well, the first thing that you would do as a player is that you would roll your character. Rolling your character is pretty simple. You use this book here. This is the player's handbook. That you would pick a race, and when you think of race, it's more like a species, because you have many different races. You have dwarves, humans, of course, half elves, half elves, halflings, orcs, and they're also halflings, or those are gnolls. Yeah, like the little garden gnomes. Gnolls. That's a gnoll is a kind of a wolf-like headed guy. Anyway, you would create your race, and in some DMs would allow you to play odd things like gnolls or trolls or any amount of kind of craziness. But for the typical game, you would work off of this. You would roll your 6-sided dice and come up with a series of numbers, your ability scores ranging from 3 to 18. You would add in your modifiers. You would sit in and write down your traits that you would have from your race. And once you have your numbers based off your strength, your dexterity, your constitution, your intelligence, your wisdom, and your charisma, then you'll sit down with your player's character sheet, which is an example of in the back of the book, or it was at one point in time. The character sheets look very similar to this. This is a generic character sheet, but there you go. It's a pre-made character that you could buy in this little box kit right here. This character right here, she has her strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. It tells you that she is a halfling, and it gives you some of her feats, her gear, and her skills. You sit down with your DM. Your DM will give you a scenario. He'll say something to the effect of you're walking into town with a group of your friends. You can do backstories. You could talk with your buddies to come up with large amount of backstories. And the DM would sit down and say, okay, you walk into this town with a group of your friends. What do you do? That's the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons. There is no limits and there is no bounds. You can absolutely do anything within reason, or attempt whatever based on your scores that you have, which you would roll, and your own imagination. You would play a game that literally has no bounds, and it's not like playing Monopoly where you're going around the board trying to collect money. If you wanted to go off that board and go into another game, that's entirely possible in this game. Hopefully I've done a fair enough job explaining it within our time restraints, and I appreciate all of your time viewing my silly little video. Thanks a bunch.